Now I'm here to tell you guys, if you're sick and tired of seeing videos that talk about the quick tips or tricks or little changes that you can make in your life in order to get the good life, on this page we actually give you the real secret, which is an in-depth map to actually help you guys make a full transformation on who you are. This starts off with things like your philosophy, the way you perceive the world, the daily actions you're taking every single day, and we actually tell you what you need to change in your life in order to automatically attract the life that you want. If you're just looking for the quick way to success, this page isn't for you. This is for people who are hard workers, who are not lazy, who really have a deep desire to become the person they want to be in life. I have a newsletter called The Next Chapter. I'm gonna leave a link in the bio. We essentially send you on a week-to-week basis everything that you need to do in order to achieve the good life in terms of health, wealth, and relationships. We go into in-depth subjects, deeper than the topics that I speak about in my videos. And in there, I actually give you practical steps that you can take on a day-to-day basis. This newsletter is free. It's coming into your email every single day. Sometimes when you're going around doing what you need to do in life, you don't have the time to sit down, plug in and listen to a video, but everyone has time to quickly go through a 5 to 10 minute email. So make sure you subscribe to that. And this is the next video. Let's go, guys. Now I'm gonna start this video with saying something to you guys that maybe you haven't ever heard before. And that is, aging isn't the same as growing up. So when I was younger, since I've been in this sort of education system, there was always one particular goal in which my parents, family, and everyone else in my life wanted me to move towards. That was, the education system was built to build me skills that I could then use in order to exchange my skills for income. That income can bring money to myself, and that money will be used to build a family, a home, and eventually when I got children, pave the same path for them as well. And what that means is we're not really given an actual definition of what growing up is. All we seem to know is that we need to go into the education system, we need to go from year to year to year, grade to grade to grade, learn a little bit more each year, and eventually we'll have enough knowledge and skill that we'll be able to go into the workplace. Once we're in the workplace, we save money and then we basically accumulate a load of materialistic things which represent being an adult. This goes for things like having a house, having a car, being able to afford school fees, going on a few holidays a year, pretty much the mediocre life which many people around us, the 99% of people around you probably live. Even the people who do have a bit of money, if you actually break down what they're doing in their life, it's maybe they're doing a few more holidays, maybe they have a bigger house, maybe they have a better car, but really and truly, they're living the same life, which is simply build up your skills, get some money in, and essentially just spend that money on anything to give you an extra dopamine hit. Now, because we're not actually given a definition of what growing up is, and we don't actually know what the sort of bar should be for someone we consider being mature and adult, what happens is we sort of do the very minimum we need to do in order to survive in the world, and we stop developing ourselves. And a lot of us have still got characteristics that we had as children, which we should have got rid of, and characteristics which we should have kept from our childhood that we've now got rid of because it's beaten out of us through life experiences, the negatives, the naysayers, and things like that, which I'll be going in depth into in this video. Now, one of my favorite philosophers is actually Carl Jung. I never thought in my life, if you had told me when I was 16 years old, I'd be listening to some German philosopher who's passed away, looking into his ideas and exploring what he had to say in the world. But one of the things I really liked about him is his ability to study human nature. Authors like Robert Greene, Carl Jung, Friedrich Nietzsche, these people who go into in-depth on human psychology and behaviors and basically break it down in such a way that we can actually understand ourselves from a very logical point of view. I really admire those people. But Carl Jung had these archetypes, and one of them really spoke to me. So Carl Jung had this archetype where it's called Puer Aeternus, which is basically forever boy, Peter Pan syndrome. And when I sort of started studying his philosophies and what he sort of had to say about the forever boy, a lot of it resonated with my sort of psychology throughout my 20s. Now being 30, a lot of those have gone away, but throughout the time that I was in my 20s, I used to think I was an adult, but looking back at it, I hadn't really grown up, apart from I had more responsibilities. I was still a teenager, a kid at heart, but basically in an adult's body, going through the motions every single day. So when I first got to 18 and I went to university, right, you don't really have any skills. You've not really been exposed to the world, different personalities. You're pretty much from whatever town you're from, your local area that you live in, and you're essentially surrounded by the same sort of people. But when I went to university, I moved to London. I was from a small town and I moved to London City. London City, capital of the UK, huge city, multicultural, very diverse. And when I went to university, I was now exposed to different personalities and different people. And for the first time, I was away from home. This was the first time when I was actually receiving money, which is a student loan government gives you in order to pay your school fees. But also you get a small loan, which you're given to basically live off of. Buy your food, pay your rent, etc., etc. So when I went into university, I was pretty much at 18. So I was considered an adult because I could do things like buy alcohol. You can drive a car, but psychologically, you're still a child. If you haven't been exposed to the things that you need to do in order to be mature in your thinking, then I would argue you're actually still a child. And I'd argue you're still a child until that changes. You could be 50, and if you still think like that, in my eyes, you're still a child. But we'll get to that later. So anyway, when I got into university, essentially, there's a whole load of experiences which my mother couldn't prepare me for, which I was now exposed to. One, it's the idea of being socially extrovert. Now, I've said this in previous videos, but when I was 18, I was pretty confident going into university. Not necessarily because I naturally had this confidence that everybody's going to like me, but I had curiosity. I was a learned extrovert through the friends I developed in my secondary school days, high school for you guys in America. And what that made me able to what I was able to realize through those days was that most people are nervous, and if you're just the first person to say hello, even if you were nervous coming up to them to say hello, they almost project the idea of confidence onto you. They think, oh, that guy's confident, he came up to us and said hello, I could never do that. When really you was as nervous as them, you just basically went through the motions anyway and got to the other end. So when I realized that, I never really was afraid to say hello to people, because I knew, probably like me, they're stuck in their head, they don't know what to say, they're awkward, just like I am, and if I start the conversation, they'll be actually thankful that someone's actually engaging with them. So when I came into uni, essentially I didn't live on the campus, because when I got my student fees and we calculated it, we realized that if I lived close to the university but not on campus, I was going to save a lot more money and have money to spend on myself. It wasn't that I was really financially illiterate or something like that. It was just basically that I looked at the situation and I thought to myself, okay, I can buy more clothes if I don't live in the university itself. Now, of course, the money you had still wasn't really enough, but I still had enough to buy for myself. Basically, I could spend money on rent and still have some money to play around with what I want to buy for me. New boots, new trainers, new jackets, clothes, etc. Now, there's other experiences which I was exposed to. For the first time when I was 18, I was old enough to get a job, but I didn't have any skills that I could carry into the workplace. So I had to look for environments that were going to take on someone with very little experience. The first job I had is I essentially signed up for an agency which basically was in charge of hiring caterers for different restaurants in all sorts of locations across London. So you would get a text where you would have to travel to a certain part of the city, and you'd have to get there, I don't know, maybe 5 a.m. They didn't care how you got there, you just had to be there, check in. You might do 4 to 5 hours max. It's minimum wage. You're barely making any money. I think it was like £7.50 an hour, £8 an hour, you know. And once you make that money, essentially, you're done for the day. You don't know if you're going to get work the next day. If you do a good job and they refer you, they might ask you to come back more consistently. So it's sort of you get work based off of merit. How hard you're working. But at the end of the day, my mum told me before I went to university is that I need to get as much experience as humanly possible. But when you haven't got any experience in anything, essentially her advice was you need to just do everything and anything. She came into this country with £500, and that's what she did. So she said, you need to do the same. So I began my journey of doing catering, and for the first time you're in a work environment, you realize that you have to be punctual with your time. See, as a teenager, you were always showing up to your friend's house when you wanted. Yeah, you had to go to school on time and show up to lessons on time, but There wasn't any real repercussions apart from your school teacher might call your parents and say he's not showing up to class, things like this. But if you decided to keep missing class, there was no real life repercussions for that. But when you need money and you're working a job and you're failing to show up every single time, there's real life repercussions that are going to force you to grow up. So this is an example of something that is going to help you grow up, that doesn't involve age. The experience of actually getting into the workplace and building skills that can bring value to other people, other companies, and everything else. So I had to learn that. I had to learn to basically deal with bad managers. When you're in low wage, minimum paying jobs, you're probably going to experience the managers that are very, Machiavellian. They're very, commanding. They don't respect you. They don't respect your time. They know you're on minimum wage. You need the money. So you have to deal with that disrespect, that knock on your confidence. You have to learn to stand for yourself. You have to learn to tolerate it. If you need the money, you might have to turn a blind eye to that. You have to build a backbone. You have to know when you're not being paid on time, and you have to start, challenging people and saying, hey, I deserve this, 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 and this. These are things that you're not taught in school. These are lessons that you have to experience by going into the world and actually going through the motions and learning it yourself firsthand. You can't read this in a book and automatically get the skills to do this. You actually go into the real world and actually apply it to your life as you're living through it. This is an example of aging isn't the same as growing up. Growing up is actually going through that pain, those awkward moments, and coming out on the other end. So the main theme of this story was essentially the social development you have to go through as you go from a teenager in a small town or wherever you lived into living somewhere where there's now multiple personalities, and you have to learn to get on with different sorts of people, workplace, in uni, in the streets, in clubs, wherever it is, right? Now, the theme of my 20s was pretty much every single role I took on, I would jump from one to the other. I did waiting, I did sales assistant in retail stores for a lot of times, and I would always work for agencies because I needed something part-time with my studies. So with that, what would happen is I would be moved from location to location. So one thing I did good in my 20s is I had a lot of exposure to many different types of people. I learned about different cultures, different work environments, working with different people. For example, when you're working in a place where you're a caterer, you might be wearing something really smart. Black blazer, black shirt, black trousers, black shoes. When I was working in a more casual store, that does retail clothing, then maybe you're wearing jeans and a top, and you learn sort of what's the green lights and the red lights. You're learning things like ironing your own clothes for the first time, washing your own clothes, being responsible for, taking care of yourself so that you can actually basically show up to work presentable. Because, in retail, a lot of these places, if you show up unpresentable, you will be sent home because you can't be greeting customers. You haven't had a bath in like 10 all the little things I used to do as a teenager. You tell me you have a shower, I'm thinking, nah, man, I'm trying to play my video game. You're like 13 years old. You got to grow out of that, and you've got to actually be a little bit more responsible. When I was jumping from place to place to place to place, although I was getting the experience of multiple different personalities being exposed to, multiple different salaries, multiple different jobs, multiple different skills I was developing subconsciously, I was never grounded in one thing. I didn't really know who I was. So essentially, I was just going through the motions. Yes, I was getting a job. I never sat down and actually looked at where I wanted to head to in life. Similar to a child when you're jumping from one game to another, one group of friends to another, it was that sort of routine that I was stuck in. And like I said, the idea of maturity is when you start taking accountability for your life, getting some sort of clarity and moving in that direction every single day and chipping away at it bit by bit. But that's not taught to you in school. You might be taught the skills, the knowledge, things like that in a theory sense, but you're not taught it in a practical sense. And this is something that you also have to learn as you're sort of aging. And this is the transformation from being a child into an adult. My definition is when you've actually got real life experience and you've transcended through those experiences. And those experiences I had jumping from one thing to another, I always felt sort of lost. I didn't feel like any job that I was doing, I really wanted to be in there long term. I was doing it for the money, I was doing it for the motions, but really and truly in my 20s, what I wanted to be was a rapper, but I also had so many other things that I wanted to do. Similar to my work life where I was jumping from one job to another. One minute I was recording music, the next I was doing a bit of club promoting, Then I'd be going out with my friends to different cities. Then we'd be talking about doing this project in uni. And, I was never consistent with the thing that I was doing at the time. And the reason I wasn't consistent is because you're too young. Your brain hasn't developed. You don't really know what you want. So therefore, it's very difficult for you to pick one thing and move towards that with everything you've got, because you're doubting yourself. You're exposed to so many new things that you end up being curious and having that childlike curiosity of trying to pick which one most resonates with you. But you never pick one because every single thing seems to have the shiny star effect on you. You used to think that that side of life is better than where I'm currently at. And this is something I had to learn as I was going through life through my 20s. I picked up drinking habits as well, because a lot of the habits I had when I was in my 20s, in my teenage years, was drinking. Drinking culture is a huge thing once you get to 18. You can finally do this thing, drinking. You've been hearing in the music, seeing on TV, seeing adults do it, and it's sort of prohibited for you as a child. So now you think, okay, now I can do that thing which is taboo. Maybe you get into drugs, who knows? I didn't really get into that too hard. For me, it was drinking. That was my sort of poison. That sort of had me spiraling downwards. And a lot of the things you do as well when you're in your 20s is you're doing it for the validation of other people. So I'll give you an example. A lot of the times, clubbing itself, you take away the alcohol, most people in that club will not have a good time. They don't know how to basically generate the emotions they need to have a good time, even though the environment is built for them to enjoy themselves. It's got the music, it's bringing a crowd of people. You would think that they have multiple opportunities to socialize, speak to people from different walks of life, but yet we're so stuck in our heads and we're so underdeveloped in this social aspect that we need alcohol and we need drugs and we need other things in order to sort of gain the courage to speak to people. And to tell you the truth, even with alcohol involved, it's a small percentage of people who are actually going in the club and actively trying to meet new people. I used to think that everybody will be doing that, but really it's a small group of us, and the small group of us don't even know what we're doing. So most people just go out for a night out because they want to be with their friends and they want to dance. And if you were to ask them the real truth, they're not really having a good time, but they're doing it because that's what they believe they have to do in order to fit in with the tribe. This is a lot of university culture. This is what it is, what it's built off of, campus culture. Everyone has different personalities, but we all seem to do the same activities, even though we probably have a different perspective on everything and we could actually bring variety into each other's lives. We end up just doing the things that make us look like we fit into the tribe, and therefore we all look similar. Seeking validation is a big thing, and seeking validation, if you actually track that into childhood, what I'm talking about, you become an adult in age, but you haven't actually grown up. I remember being in school. When we would come into school, the kid with the coolest hairstyle, trainers, has the house party that everybody's going to. This is the person that will be the popular person. This will be the person you look up to, the person who has the most, right? And this is essentially the blueprint in order to be valued by other people. And as you go into adulthood, there's a few people that mature where they actually look at your personality, your morals, your character, and they have actual things that basically put you in the category of being somebody worth respecting. But for the most part, be honest, when you went into university, you're 18 to 21, whatever age you went in there, not many people were looking for good character. Most people were just looking for who's the person that talks to everybody, who's the kid with the house party that's going on, or the flat party in the campus, who's the person that, everybody seems to know. Who's the person on social media, who's this, who's that. It's all these superficial values that we're following and we're using to basically befriend people. Who's the person that spoke to us for the first time? You don't really have clarity on what sort of people you want to associate with, so you would just associate with people based off of proximity. If somebody lived in your flat, you might become friends with them. You have nothing in common with that person, but your biggest fear is to be isolated, so you simply befriend them for the sake of that. And this is that immature level of thinking that you have to develop past. And I say this to say that all these things might sound obvious if you've transcended past that, but if you actually think of it, no one actually teaches you that you have to transcend past that. And if you start paying attention to people, or even looking at your own life, you might see some of these traits still being reflected in your life. You've got the wrong sort of people around you. They're not really your friends. If you were to do something meaningful, like pursue your dreams? Would they support you? Would they actually click on that video, like it, call you up, say, yo, keep doing what you're doing? Or do they only call you when they want to go out and they want to get drunk? How much of your active life are they a part of? Are you just in a WhatsApp group with them? Are these people you can rely on if shit was to hit the fan, right? There's so much going on in your life that you haven't actually looked at closely and asked yourself, have I actually gone from a child to an adult in this aspect of my life? What about your ability to socialize, right? I remember me in my 20s. It still comes now, but it's very minimum compared to in my 20s. The idea of going up to a girl in the middle of the day when you're sober and just being very direct, telling her you find her attractive. I used to do it, but I used to do it simply because I didn't want my friends to think I was scared. But I remember going through the motions as I'm walking up to her, that deep anxiety that's in your chest. Whoops, if so-and-so sees me. Now they think I'm an idiot. Look what I've done. Oh, this is embarrassing. Everyone see me get rejected. Oh, what about my haircut? Maybe I need a haircut before I go up to her. If you remember as a little child, a child when they go on the playground or a theme park. Theme park's a great example. And there's a certain ride. It's a big ride for them, at least at the time. And they want to go on it, but there's a little anxiety there. That's almost the same feeling that comes up as we go into these social situations. Now, do we want to consider someone who's scared to speak to other people really an adult in that aspect of life? When it comes to that particular thing, have they grown up? Because really and truly, we get to set the standards of what we consider an adult. And if we have higher standards, we're going to meet those standards, aren't we? But the problem is we don't actually address these situations because nowhere in life is going to tell you to address them. You go through your whole life speaking to the same small group of people, never really developing social skills, personality of your own. And then when other people don't really get on with you because you haven't actually built your character, your charisma, your confidence, rather than you accepting, do you know what, maybe I need to work on that aspect in life, you dismiss it as if it's their problem. Oh, I don't want to be friends with them anyway. It's coping. It's coping rather than thriving. It's that same character trait that you had as a child when somebody didn't want to talk to you and you said, well, I don't want to talk to them anyway. Playground sort of rules, right? But that's seeking validation. You know, we all know it. Things like buying trainers to fit into the group, you know, well, the next set of Jordans, Nikes, Balenciagas. I remember when they came out, we all wanted to buy those. I'd spend like my whole paycheck on a pair of shoes just so that people would look at me and think, oh, look, he's got those trainers. You know, you think these things are building equity in attraction. You think like a girl is going to see you in a pair of Balenciagas. She's going to walk up to you and ask for your number. You know, all these childlike mindsets that you have to get out of as you grow older. The other childlike characteristic trait is never taking responsibility for your own life, right? If you look really closely at yourself and you want to do a deep identity change, you can probably see some of these traits in yourself, whether you're a man or a woman. You know, I'll give you a really good example that I see all the time on the internet. You know, dating has become this really complex thing in today's society. Everyone's struggling to get a significant other and actually establish a relationship that can last over a lifetime, right? We're all jumping from one person to the other and we're all pointing the finger at the other person. Women blaming the men blaming the women. You know, oh, it's them, their mentality. They don't really know what they're talking about. They're delusional. Women also saying the same about men. No one's taking responsibility to say that the results that I'm getting in life is always a reflection of me. I can only control what I do. I can't control what everybody else does. This is a big problem in society. Very controversial one. But even that, if you look at that, never taking responsibility. Who's the epitome of never taking responsibility? Children, right? They don't clean their room. You tell them off for that. Rather than them saying, you're right, I should have cleaned my room. What do? They start getting angry at you. Oh, it's your fault, this. Or some of them start crying. Failing to take accountability, right? When they do something at school, like get into a fight, you come home and you're trying to tell them off, maybe. Does that kid always straight away say, do you know what, I was in the wrong, even though he was, you know, annoying me at the time? I should have actually taken a step back and actually apologized to that person and figured out what's going on. They don't think that. When you try to address them on that situation, they always have something negative to say. They want to argue. They want to say, no, well, it's his fault. It's not my fault. He hit me first. It was all him, not me, or all her, not me. These are childlike characteristics. Once again, you're not told about actually growing out of this phase in your life. You're not told to develop that part of your life and say, right, in order for you to be an adult, the bar is you need to take responsibility for your life wholeheartedly. Everything that happens, you need to say, you know what, there's something I could have done to change my circumstances. It's not an insult. This is actually the most liberating thing you can be told, because it's the first step in the right direction in your life, because you now know that the bad things and the good things that happen to you are directly in your control, right? Never taking responsibility. How many adults do you know in the workplace? Something goes wrong, they blame a supervisor, a colleague. Age doesn't matter. You can get people doing this at 18, 15, 8 years old, 65, 50. This doesn't change. We see them all around us, but here's a bigger challenge. Do you see it in yourself? Where are you complaining and not taking responsibility? I used to do the dating thing. That's why I'm mentioning it. Oh, look at these girls. They want all these rich 6-figure guys, 7-figure guys. Really, do they? When you go to the gym, or you go to your local store, you go to the local town and you find someone in a relationship in your workplace, are they dating a 7-figure person? You know, they're not. The average person isn't. So that means there is people who are still realistic and grounded. But for whatever reason, I'm struggling to find one, right? That's my fault. That's me failing to take responsibility for the results I'm receiving in my life. You've got to develop this. Look at yourself. Forget looking at other people. What other people are doing has no direct impact in your life unless it's doing something to affect you. You shouldn't really care. But what you're doing to sabotage your own life, you need to look into that psyche where you're not taking responsibility. One of my favorite books that I read by Benjamin Hardy is Personality Isn't Permanent. And it talks about the idea of the things you value at maybe 8 years old, 16, 20, 30, 40, 50. All of these things are always changing. At a certain part in your life, you believe that wearing designer clothes maybe is absolutely everything in the world. And maybe when you had your firstborn child, if you have children or you don't have children, these things changed for whatever reason, whatever sparked that change in that. But your personality slowly changes over the years. You know, this is the natural way in which things are meant to go in life. This is actually maturing. This is growing up. Now, there's things that can escalate that progression very, very quickly. One example is the one I just gave. If you're young and you have a child, well, very quickly, you're snapped into reality. Unless you're someone who's directly choosing not to be actively part of that kid's life, you're going to realize that the money that you were going to invest in yourself is now being allocated to a child. And if you're young, you probably don't have the skill sets in order to acquire a job that's really going to allow you to be financially free to the point that you can also enjoy the things you want to enjoy in your life and still afford to pay for your child. Matter of fact, most likely, the money you're making is most likely, the bulk of it is going towards your kids. School fees, making sure they've got Pampers and things like that. Socks, clothes, they're always growing, so you need to buy new clothes every year. School uniform, things like that. Right? This is something that can escalate your progression in life. Maybe you go through some trauma where you don't grow up with parents. You're forced to grow up very quickly. In that case, you can find 18, 19, 16 even year olds who are more mature and more grown up than like a 40-year-old, still relying on his parents for absolutely everything. Right? We see these examples all the time in life, right? That if we don't go through something necessarily that is going to help change our personality or escalate that, then it's easy for us to stay at the same position in life. And that book was so interesting to me because it made me start realizing that if I keep focusing on the things I want now, this is how I go back into that childlike characteristics of jumping from one thing to another, to another, to another. What I'd be better doing is looking at long-term what I want. You know, when you see these videos talking about you should sacrifice your 20s for, you know, building your business, I wish I listened to those videos. But I wasn't mature enough to take on that advice. And a lot of you aren't too. A lot of the things I'm saying to you guys, you're going to watch them now. You're going to come back to them maybe later on in life and you're going to get it. Some of you are my age or older, 30 or older. Some of you guys are watching this and saying, no, he makes sense. I can see all the things I wasted doing in my 20s that I don't even care about anymore. You know, they help develop your personality, that's correct. So you should never, want to go backwards. But at the end of the day, a lot of it didn't necessarily have to take place. In order for you to grow up, you need to actually start looking at your personality, who you are as a person, right? You need to associate the characteristics that you want in the future version of yourself and start asking yourself, how can I develop these characteristics? If you want confidence, what sort of situations do you need to put yourself in order to build a natural confidence? Who are the people you should be associated with? Who around you right now has the confidence that you want? And what can you do to observe what they're doing? Do they speak to everybody they meet? Why don't you start doing that? If you're naturally a socially awkward person, this is good advice for you. You don't have to start big, but when you're going into the shop and you're buying a Red Bull, why don't you start by saying hello to the people serving you? Start with small talk. How's your day? Understand that either way, you have to develop these skills in order to get the life that you want, really and truly. If you really want the good life, I'm talking about people who are ambitious. If you're watching a video this long, I'm guessing you're ambitious. If you really want the good life, whatever that looks like for you, you're going to have to develop a lot of these characteristics. You're going to have to grow up with your social skills, your discipline, your ability to be grounded and do one thing consistently over a long period of time. Not just jumping from one thing to another, jumping from one video to the other. Watching this video, making notes. Taking away something from this video that you can actually apply in your real life, and then you can actually say that video changed this in my life. If you just watch this video and you go on to the next video, you're like me, my early 20s and mid and late 20s, jumping one job to another, one hustle to the other, club promoting, rapping, chasing girls, working on my business, going to the gym a little bit, quitting. You're not grounded in anything. You don't have real clarity. You don't have real direction. Now, all these traits that you work on, whether that's confidence, social skills, whether that's your ability to be disciplined, maybe it's your ability to critically think. Some of you are watching these videos, you're hearing the examples and you're switching off. You haven't got critical thinking skills. Really, everything I'm saying should just inspire you to think. All I'm doing with my videos is inspiring you to actually think a little bit deeper than where you're currently thinking. It's up to you to figure out the little in-betweens. And then with the little in-betweens, if you do the things that I tell you to do in my newsletter and apply it to your actual life, that's when you begin to see progress. But in order to do that, you need to change. You need to go from being a child psychologically to being an adult and define what that is for you. One thing that I always say that is really going to help you with doing this is, I want you to look at certain characteristics you have, like always wanting to buy the next trendy thing. And ask yourself, if you grew up as a kid and your mom had that characteristics, would you have respect or would you lose respect for her? Maybe you had a parent like this. Let me ask you, if your parents, difficult question to say, but if they were dating multiple people all the time, and every single time that went to pieces, they blamed somebody else, would you admire that? Would you say, yeah, that's the real reason? Or would you look at that and say, I wish you'd figured it out? What are the things you would want to be for your kids if you have children already? No. Define what growing up is to you. Although I've grown up in a lot of aspects in my life now, there's still a lot of more growing to do. Really, for me, my definition is growing up is when you actually have financial independence. That's the bar I've set for myself, and I'm talking about real financial independence. Live where you want, wear what you want, speak to who you want. I haven't got there yet. So in that aspect, I'm still immature. It's not an insult. I don't feel insulted. This is having higher standards for myself. But then again, we can focus on the negative, but there's also positive traits you used to have as children. Some of you didn't have these traits, but maybe you can see them in other kids and sort of relate to what I'm saying. But that curiosity you had as a kid of seeing somewhere and saying, I want to go there. Or seeing a toy and saying, I want that for me. Now, when you was a kid, you didn't see a toy and you think to yourself, right, I want to see so-and-so play with that toy and I'm going to be a fan of him playing with that toy. You said, no, I want that toy for me, right? But now that you're an adult, you've lost that trait. When you see the nice car, you look at the nice car and you say, wow, what a nice car. I could never get a car like that. I can never live in a house like that. I can never have a significant other like that. You've lost that selfishness that you had as a child that some of you think is a negative thing, but really it can be used in a positive way too. It can be used to move you towards what you're trying to achieve. But you've kept on to other things as a child which you should have got rid of, like your lack of control of emotions. When something messes up your day at the start of the day, you take your anger on the whole world for the rest of the week. Kids, when they throw tantrums. You know, in this world, we got 50-year-olds still throwing tantrums. All right? You should have got rid of that trait and kept the other one. Right? What about the idea of, as a kid, you used to be able to play? What's play, really? Play was you didn't need really extravagant things in order to learn how to enjoy yourself. You didn't need to watch TV. You knew how to self-generate that emotion of happiness with the smallest activities. But now that you're an adult, you need to go to the 5-star restaurant and have fancy meals with your friends. As a woman, you need to go to brunch with the girls and have great interior designs inside in order to enjoy yourselves. If you're just sat in a room alone, you don't know how to self-generate that joy. For a guy, it might be the opposite. It might be that as a kid, you were playing so much, and now that you're an adult, all you do is play video games. You haven't actually gone out into the world and start building a foundation for yourself. You don't have any experiences, you don't know places to go to eat, you don't have any stories you can tell, anything that would really make someone want to actually get to know you more. So in that case, for you, you would have to get rid of the play and start being a bit more serious, whilst the people who have stopped learning to just be present and enjoy themselves, they need to get that childlike play characteristic back in their life. But what are the other traits in childhood that you would see as positives, and what are the ones that are negative that you need to get rid of, right? Indecisiveness, not being able to make a decision and stick with that decision, right? That decision of you don't know where you want to go for your birthday. Ask most people when they're adults where they want to go for their birthday. Huh? Now, some of you might say, Tino, it's not that deep. If I don't know where I want to go for my birthday, it doesn't mean I'm a child. But hey, it's your standard. But be honest with yourself. Is your indecisiveness holding you back from achieving the life you want? Where could you be making more decisions? Where do you delay decision making and it affects everything else in your life? For some of you guys, it's as simple as you don't actually plan your days. If you've got something you're working towards, why don't you actually take the time to go on your phone, put it into a Google Calendar and plot it into your day and look at it in the morning and do it. It's that simple, but you won't do that. You don't know what you want in a significant other. That's a big one. What could you do to fast track that progress? What could you do to grow up? Well, maybe you need to date a little bit more, and you need to date in a casual sense. If every single relationship you're going into, you're sort of judging that person based off of, do they fit the husband material or not? Might have a hard time with that. You might be a guy and you do this, you might be a woman and you do this, right? You meet somebody, they have the courage to come say hello to you. As a woman, a man comes up to you, hey, he wants to get your number. You dismiss him immediately. But you're struggling to find a partner. Don't have to date absolutely everyone, but open-mindedness, that might help you with your indecisiveness. You might actually start learning, oh, this person has the characteristics I never knew I liked until I met this person. See, that's one thing I did do good. I dated a lot. And in the beginning days, I had no idea what I wanted. You asked me at 16 what I wanted in a girl. A body, a pretty face, nice hair, smells nice. That's it, that's the criteria. What you want in a wife? Body, nice face, nice hair, smells nice. What kind of criteria is that? What about the values? Are they aligned with where you're going in life? You don't really figure these things out until you start growing up. There's certain family dynamics. Even if that person's perfect for me, it won't work because our families may be different religions. And that's going to be a big problem later down the line for things like wedding ceremonies, for bringing kids into the equation. Some of you guys don't care. Some of you say, if the parents don't approve of me, I don't want them in my life. Well, that's up to you, right? What about anxiety? Now, I know, of course, there's medical sense of anxiety. But what about the anxiety we know we can actively do something about? Fear to approach people. Fear to put ourselves out there. Fear to project our voice. Fear to say our opinions. Right? We accept this as if this is some sort of great meteor that came from the sky and just smashed on the earth and we can't get rid of it. But what did our childhood look like? Did we ever actually have experiences that can help maybe get us out of that situation where we're always anxious? I did. You know, I was moving from different schools throughout my childhood. So one advantage I had is when there's new people, it's all I've ever known is how to be able to meet different people in different walks of life who aren't from the same background as me, who don't look like me, who don't talk like me. But a typical problem you have for people who come from more lower income backgrounds, and this could also be in higher income backgrounds, actually, you can do both. But if you're from a low income background and you surround yourselves with people who make a lot more money, who come from better backgrounds than you might feel they're judging you. And that makes you anxious. So you automatically do things, body language, and even conversations that automatically isolate you from that group. You think you're being isolated, but it's your subconscious pushing yourself away from these people because you're insecure. Same with high income people, right? If you come from a very wealthy family and you've never been around the average Joe, which makes up 99% of the population, you can't relate to them. You don't try to have empathy, so you just dismiss yourself. And empathy, that's the biggest transition from childhood to adulthood, when you learn to have empathy for other people. Learn to understand that you're not perfect yourself, and you look at someone else's circumstances and actually maybe try to look at it from their point of view. But how many adults do you know have no empathy towards anyone else? Can we really call that maturity? Can we really call that growing up? Make a definition of what you believe growing up is. See, if I had done this early in my life, I wouldn't have had to build up an alcohol addiction, go through the trials and tribulations I went through, embarrassing myself in certain situations, trying to seek the validation of people who aren't even in my life anymore, trying to prove something that doesn't even matter at this point in my life. I could have learnt those lessons a lot quicker if I came out the gate with an actual development plan for my personality. I knew what I wanted, I had more clarity. But like I said, how can you build clarity if you haven't got experience in the world? So maybe this is the timeline it was meant to happen. See, it's easy to get caught up in looking at people on the internet you see younger than you, whatever age you are, and thinking those people have got it. But you don't know where they haven't grown up in other aspects of life. They might have all the money in the world, but they haven't actually matured in their thinking. And as the years go by, you're slowly going to see that money leave them. And later you're going to become wealthy because you actually took the time to actually build a solid foundation and develop your personality. So this video, really, I just wanted to give you a bunch of examples from my story, a bunch of things to think about. In my newsletter and in my videos, what I'm essentially pointing out to you guys is that the good life you want isn't just a series of tricks and habits you can do. I say this all the time, start of the video. There's something really, really going wrong with your philosophy if you're not already moving in the right direction. If you're already doing the steps you need to take, this video might not be as necessary to you. But if you're really an ambitious person, then you would be able to take something from this video anyway. But I want you to start looking at the way in which you're looking at the world. The childlike characteristics you had, how many of those have you actually matured in? I'm not talking about maturity in the sense that you've got a house, a car, some kids, you pay the bills. What's your plan for the next 5 to 10 years? See, a kid lives his life day by day. An adult should have his life sort of planned out. This is where I'm headed, this is where I'm going. Maybe that's not your bar. What's your bar? I can't define that for you. Rather than looking at it from a point of this is an insult, you need to look at it like, okay, this is why certain parts of my life aren't going right. I haven't actually matured in my thinking. There's something I need to change about my philosophy that's going to actually help me start seeing better results in my life. How great is that I have control of that? Take from this video what you will. Aging isn't the same as growing up. I continue to make videos like this. We're going to be going into more in-depth subjects. My newsletter actually gives you practical roadmaps that you can use in order to develop this part of you as well. It gives you things to take away. I leave all of that for the people who are serious and actually want to change their life. These videos, they're just to inspire your thought process a little bit. My name's Tino. Like, comment, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.